call Richard Fuller to move the motion.
Thank you very much indeed, Sir Mark. It's a pleasure, a particular pleasure to serve under your chairmanship to discuss the recent announcements on the Bedford to Cambridge link for East-West Rail. I'm very grateful to the Speaker for permitting this debate and for the attendance of colleagues from other areas that are affected by the decision in my own area. Their areas affected include directly the parishes of Brickhill, which I share with my honourable friend, the member for Bedford, Clapham, Ravensden, Wilden, Wyboston, Chawston and Colston, Roxton and Thamesford, and also of neighbouring parishes that will be affected, including Great Barford, Little Barford and Everton. Now, Mr. Kendrick, Sir Mark, many people think that a railway from Oxford to Cambridge is a nice idea. I include myself as having that thought. I used to think that too. But as I've got into the details of this railway, and as the performance of East-West Rail has rolled out, my confidence and support has been completely eroded. And I'm sure parliamentary colleagues here today will have their own questions for the Minister on this. But I am grateful to the Minister for being here, for his helpful interactions with me. And I will share with him after the debate, if I may, some specific questions that constituents have asked me to raise with him, and perhaps he can then respond to those in due course. But I want to highlight 6 key asks for today. Number 1, will the Minister agree to visit my constituency to walk the proposed route? Will the Minister request the National Audit Office to conduct an inquiry into the East-West Rail Company to provide the independent scrutiny that has been lacking to date? Will the Minister release the full business case and cost-benefit analysis after the theory of change assessment, including all details of anticipated passenger and freight traffic, a discounted cash flow, and a net present value? Will the Minister instruct East-West Rail today to release online more detailed maps so people can actually see what the impact is on their parish, their street, or on their home? Will the Minister instruct East-West Rail to write to all property owners whose home or land is within the current corridor, explaining what the specific impact will be on their home or their property? And sixthly, will the Minister conduct a full evaluation of the current status of primary care, supply and demand in my constituency, and the impact on this of East-West Rail? Now, Sir Mark, the last month's announcement by East-West Rail was supposed to clarify, to be deterministic, to eliminate doubts, and to sideline the NIMBYs, and to propose a great national project of economic growth. It has failed on all these fronts. Instead of a final route, we now have a completely new twist to the story, quite literally, between Roxton and Thamesford. And there is more doubt about the form of traction, or perhaps that is just deflection by East-West Rail. Far from sidelining opposition to NIMBYs, the announcement has galvanised a much wider political alliance that has lost faith in this project, in the company, and which believes there is a greener, better alternative to support growth where we live. I'm happy to give way to Honourable Lady.
On the question of growth, East-West Rail should be a real opportunity for growth, but real opportunities, real problems arise if the surrounding infrastructure is not there and really put pressure on people. So does he agree with me that together with East-West Rail, the government really needs to work with local communities in order to create the additional infrastructure like bus services and GP services so people really see the benefits of that growth?
So, Mark, the Honourable is absolutely right, and that's why I circulated a letter that all parties have signed, calling for exactly that, for a greener alternative that focuses on sustainable growth, that focuses on the work-life patterns that people want, not a 19th century solution that is supposed to unlock growth on an unproven model. And one could sense the political support ebbing away from East West Rail as the announcement was made. The truth is, Sir Mark, the announcement has brought no relief to those most effective. In a rearguard action today, I understand that Beth West, the Chief Executive of East West Rail, has said she will approach government to enable the purchase now of houses that are currently planned to be demolished. This would help people who are already 2 or 3 years into uncertainty. So may I, in addition to that, ask, will the Minister instruct East West Rail to send this advice note to people whose homes or properties are within the proposed corridor, and within that, the expected distance from the rail route itself? That will broaden the clarity to a greater number of people, particularly in the villages affected. Now, the Minister will know that we had elections recently, and he will know that that has brought political change. I'm not sure around the country the political election results were good for the Conservative Party. But in Bedford Borough, the Conservatives, for the first time ever, won the directly elected mayoralty. That was a repudiation of the Liberal Democratic mayor that had supported strongly East West Rail, such an environmentally destructive route across North Bedfordshire, with phony economic benefits for the town itself. Now, with Tom Wootton as the mayor, we have someone who has a clear determination in his opposition to the proposals as presented by East West Rail. Conversely, in central Bedfordshire, we also have a new leader, an independent whose ward encompasses Tempsford, the site of a station that may herald substantial housing development measured in the tens of thousands. Does the Minister appreciate the scale of interest now in alternatives to these projects, given these political changes? Now, I've been contacted without solicitation by many sources and experts decrying the performance of the East West Rail Company. One constituent with expertise wrote to me to say, quote, "From my experience and observations, the insincerity of the process pursued by East West Rail has been its most glaring weakness. In equal measure, however, any such criticism must also lie at the door of the Department for Transport, who appear to be an acquiescing partner in the woefully inadequate activities of East West Rail. Unfortunately, the government as a whole cannot escape association with the feeling of disillusionment generated through continuous stonewalling, lack of logical business planning, flouting of the law of freedom of information, and insincerity of approach." Now, East West Rail, the route chosen, is so full of twists and turns and ups and downs. It surely competes with what is probably our country's bendiest road. I'm not sure if the Minister knows this. The B3081 at Cannes Common in Dorset, that, quote, "twists and turns more than many an alpine climb." Words that could be transposed to the route chosen by East West Rail. Now, back when governments and other people knew how to build railways in the Victorian age, of course, they chose a straighter, less hilly route. And I really must encourage the ministers to look at a video from Alison, who is a constituent of the member for Bedford, who very clearly outlines the irrationality of choosing the topography of the route that East West Rail have chosen. And one of the principles behind the campaign group, BFAIR, wrote to tell me the crux of the issue stems from the fact that the NSIP process contains a ratchet mechanism whereby, from the narrowing down of options, precludes a fundamental review or rethink of alternatives when better evidence comes to light about previously discarded options. The starting premise for growth in the ARC was flawed, and the initial public consultation into the scheme in 2019 was so badly handled that it shut out a lot of people and communities who stood to be most impacted by the scheme. And another constituent wrote, expressing the view of many in my constituency. To get to Cambridge, I personally would drive to the park and ride and get on a bus to the centre of the city, not drive to Bedford Station, pay to park, buy an expensive train ticket to get a train which would not take me to the centre. Now, I want to spend a bit of time, Mr. Chairman, on the cost-benefit analysis, because I think it's an open secret here that nobody thinks East West Rail is financially viable. Now, the former Secretary of State for Transport, the Right Honourable Member for Welling and Hatfield, less than a year ago, on the LBC radio show of Mr. Ian Dale, had the following interaction Mr. Dale, what would you cut from your transport budget? The former Secretary of State, I would take East West Rail and I would remove. Why haven't you done it already? Well, I haven't had the opportunity. Ian Dale, you're the Transport Secretary. You could easily have done it already. You could have gone to the Chancellor and said, I know you want to cut spending. Here's one way you could do that. The former Secretary of State, I have done that in other ways, but you have just asked what I would do as Prime Minister, and I am telling you, I would cut East West Rail on what's called 2 and 3, so there's the second and third tranches of it, and save £3 to £5 million straight away. He means billions. So, Minister, what would you do if you were Prime Minister? Now, a constituent wrote to me on this cost benefit, said, as someone who has had the, quote, we intend to drive a railway through your property notice recently, I'd really like to get 2 questions answered, as this document failed entirely to do so. Where is an up-to-date business case? No one has seen one. No one affected believes the valid business case exists. And when will East West Rail engage directly with homeowners on the route to purchase land? And I've mentioned the second point already. Now, East West Rail state in their documents that while the business case is still in development and won't be completed until we've obtained the required consent for the project, so you get consent and then you tell us what the business case is. In the final week's publication, the proposals are subject to a cross-governmental approval process. And in Appendix 5 to the Economic and Technical Report, it discusses the quote-unquote economic appraisal, which the report states, quote, compare benefits against costs over the life of a project or for a defined period of time. As is typical for infrastructure projects, the monetized impacts of East West Rail are projected to a point 60 years from entry into service. Both the benefits and costs are discounted and presented in 2010 prices and values in line with TAG guidance. The 60-year value is known as present value. Now, the report concludes, quote, standard approach to modeling and forecasting results showed us that, in conventional appraisal terms, the benefit-cost ratios were poor across all areas, all options. And what does poor mean, Sir Mark? It means a benefit-cost ratio of 0.26 to 0.42. And that's based on the high-growth option. The high-growth option means that the best benefit-to-cost ratio is less than half the amount of money that taxpayers are going to be asked to put in to the railway. What does that mean in terms of cost to the taxpayer? 1.5 billion to 2.4 billion thrown away on a railway. But East West Rail seeks an escape route from this common sense economic appraisal, stating, quote, these early estimates of costs were a key driver of the benefit-cost ratios, which did not account for the transformational and strategic benefits considered later as part of the application of our theory of change. And then over 2 chapters, East West Rail attempts to draw in every possible justification for their project. Talks about east-west connectivity, but doesn't mention the cancellation of the expressway. Talks about housing costs, but doesn't notice that the highest costs are where railways exist. So their proposals are as likely to increase house prices in areas where they're lower than Cambridge than they are to lower house prices in Cambridge itself. And it ignores the power of the market, with private companies already making decisions about where to locate if Cambridgeshire is too expensive. For example, Marshalls, relocating very sensibly to Cranfield. Now, Mr. Chairman, before Parliament, I'd been a partner in a strategy consulting firm, advising large businesses and utilities on investment decisions, and a partner in a venture capital fund, investing in high-growth businesses of tomorrow. I'm a graduate of Harvard Business School, and I can use all of this life experience and qualification to assess this theory of change exercise by East West Rail as complete nonsense. What is the Department of Transport metaphorically smoking if it continues to go along with this economic illiteracy? I may have missed the financial conclusion of the theory of change exercise, but perhaps the Minister can advise if he will release the full financial case, together with all assumptions and sources. And today, I issue a challenge to the Chief Executive of East West Rail to attend a public debate with me to argue the economic case for and against this project, openly, transparently, and honestly. Now, we know, Sir Mark, what the real reason behind all of this is. It's about housing. A constituent wrote to me asking, from the Economic and Technical Report, it is clear that Bedford is viewed as simply a cheaper housing estate, separate from where all the jobs are expected to be in and around Cambridge. So what is in this for Bedford? The real reason for East West Rail, in my view, it is all about concreting over North Bedfordshire. We have the issue of Thamesford with an interchange section with reports of up to 40,000 new homes in a village of currently 400 residents. But also Stewartby in mid-Bedfordshire constituency, where the Economic and Technical Report on page 92 and 93 suggests this railway will open up 70,000 jobs to households. That counts up to about 35,000 houses in my estimation, Sir Mark. Now, I'm not a NIMBY on housing. I think we should all do our fair share. But as the MP for North East Bedfordshire, I have to point out there is considerable pressure on GPs and dentists and school places. And without the investment in that form of soft infrastructure, it is very unwise to support additional housing growth. Very briefly, yes.
Does he agree that it is unfair to call people NIMBYs, like in mid-Bedfordshire, when they raise these concerns, and that they are absolutely real concerns that people need these services that go with growth and with an increased sort of railway line?
I wouldn't do what I understand the Liberal Democrats in mid-Bedford are doing, which is asking people to tell them which housing estate they don't like so they can oppose it. I don't think that's the right way to do it. But for very large-scale development, she's absolutely right. That is where we should have that consideration. I stood on a manifesto in 2019 calling for infrastructure first on these large-scale developments. I don't know if the Minister can give me an update on that. It's not his remit. I don't expect him to, but it's important because he stood on the same manifesto as I did. But we should all do our fair share. And so I looked at the census data, Sir Mark, on the growth in households in the 2011 census and the 2021 census. The national average of the increase in households over that period was 6%. And I think we all feel that rapid growth in our constituencies. Perhaps unwisely, I then decided to look at specific constituencies. I looked at the Chancellor's constituency. He's doing his bit, 6% growth. I looked at the Secretary of State for Transport's constituency, a 9% increase in households over that period, a very substantial amount above the national average. The Minister for Rail, 5%, but we'll forgive him that 1%. But North East Bedfordshire, from 2011 to 21, 21%. 3.5 times the national average of growth in households already putting pressure on GP services, already putting pressure on dentists, already putting pressure on school places. How on earth can I, as the MP for North East Bedfordshire, admit to and allow further pressure on housing growth until those problems are satisfied? I want to turn to the environmental impact. And I had interaction today with Councillor Tracy Y, who represents the ward, including Potton. And she wrote to me to say that she would like to see a commitment that this will be a project in harmony with the environment, something so future-proof, leading edge and creative. We would be a leading edge in terms of sustainability and climate resilience. I could not agree with her more. I think she's absolutely right. And we've been a bit misled, I would say, and perhaps that's unfair, about the electrification of this line. Originally, as the Minister will know, in the 2005 Railways Act, it was going to be an electrified line as part of the electric spine. In July 2012, East West Rail, the high-level output specification, East West Rail was listed as a new electric railway line. It was then dropped by East West Rail Company, but now in the latest document they say, well, it may come back. Well, Minister, which is it? Are we electrified? Or we're not electrified? Is it battery-powered? Is it not? This announcement was supposed to clarify. On the form of traction, it has done nothing to the sort. Now, I believe the ministers know that the original plans by the noble Lord Adonis in the 2017 report Partnership for Prosperity were bogus, and that they have not kept pace with changes in working patterns, nor with our greater focus on environmental issues. That's why a previous Secretary of State cancelled the expressway in 2021, stating that construction of the Oxford to Cambridge Expressway has been cancelled as analysis shows the benefits the road would deliver are outweighed by its costs. Precisely the charge that can be laid today at East West Rail, so why is the current Secretary of State not taking the same action? And a constituent writes to tell me, from a net zero perspective, how could they possibly introduce a new transport link with the intention of running diesel trains on it until 2040 at the earliest? Hardly what you describe as inspirational or forward-thinking. And another constituent wrote to me, as someone with long-standing involvement in the biotech industry and academic community, I would question the whole rationale for the railway in the first place. Of course, we all want to consolidate Cambridge's position as a technology hub. But if science and industry in Oxford and Cambridge want to collaborate, they do it remotely. East-West Rail is a 19th century response to a problem for which we in the 21st century have solutions that are cheaper, better, and less environmentally destructive. And I call on the Minister to consider those.